Good morning. Welcome to B Cube Sunday morning. It is a wonderful Sunday morning as we watch the world rise around us and we see wonder. I mean, it was a great day. I got up, took the dogs for a walk this morning, first time in almost a week, because me, like half the world, has been sick with some ugly bug that feels like COVID, hits like a Mack truck, and just makes you want to drink mint tea.
Mm.
But while we were out there, me and the puppies, they're all laying over here resting from the incredible effort of a walk. Had found some beautiful little set of roses that we took some pictures of. Made us think of our friends. Speaking of friends, we are doing some last minute work finding our guests today. Seems like we lost them.
We
It's
screwed
not
up.
that he's not. He knows where he is. We just don't know where he is, and he doesn't know where we are. And so that
Yes,
said, I would like to bring up a couple of things when I get my camera adjusted. I and that is there are Brenda's doing contacts, so you can ignore her. Say good morning, Brenda.
I
Uh,
am trying to get in touch with him, but we are between time change and computers, different time zones. I think we are
well,
screwed up.
don't tell us about it. Just get her done.
It's not going to happen. I can tell.
You're doing good. And
I
Phil, you
am.
have a new book out.
I had a new book out in March,
I
The
thought
Barefoot
what's the
Sheriff.
Barefoot Sheriff? I thought that was out.
Yeah, it's out now. It came out in March,
Okay,
and
well that's fairly new.
yeah,
And
and
what's it about?
it's 1870s, the Columbia River Plateau, very small town in transition. I have almost sentient horses. I have aliens. And I have a bunch of people trying to figure out what life is like in a period of transition. It's after the war, but there are still people suffering from it. And they're trying to get a railroad going and all the usual Western tropes, but with aliens.
I
Well,
love aliens.
it's not like you're doing Cowboys versus Aliens.
Not quite, not quite.
Yeah, hey, that was a good movie. But now, Karen,
Yes.
you have done something remarkable as well. You have taken some of the most brilliant stories you've written, and I will tell you, I don't know if that review's up yet on Amazon, but you are a brilliant short story writer.
Thank you.
Well, your years, I think, for a Yaley. Uh, so tell us about it.
Oh, well, I'm going to be doing two readings on Friday because, of course, everything gets scheduled on the same day. One of the readings is online. There's a group called a Strong Women Strange Words that's a spin-off of Broad Universe on the East Coast. And they do Sunday morning short readings. And I'm going to be with them on their Sunday podcast. You can find them just about anywhere as Strong Women Strange Words. And then on Friday evening, I'm going to be at one of Seattle's coolest bookstores. It's called the Couth Buzzard. And from 5 to 6 p.m., I'll be doing a reading and signing there. So those are kind of my big events with it. And the book, I can't tell how it's doing. Um, I have a story I will eventually tell about the reviewer who reviewed me on NetGalleys and turned out to be a turf and ripped the book to shreds because I had a very, very, as you know, powerful trans character in one of my stories. And this person went simply haywire over it. And I complained. Uh, NetGalleys booted them. And then they went over to Goodreads and eviscerated me there. So,
Wow.
yeah, if anyone wants to see a turf in action, apparently these are people who um, they download NetGalley manuscripts, which is a place where you can put your manuscript, your book, to be reviewed by a vetted reviewer. And this person is downloading manuscripts and scanning for words that she finds offensive, like trans, and then going after the book.
That is something that is worth mentioning in a larger context, that this kind of thing can happen.
I am trying to decide sort of how I want to couch it, because there were some professional groups involved in assisting me, and I don't know if they want to be mentioned in terms of what happened.
Even if you don't dig into the details, just as a general warning, that's not a bad thing. And particularly, the number of new writers who are rolling around and doing, God only knows, the stupidest things in the world. And this is the sort of thing that's worth mentioning, the bad things that can happen.
The really good thing that happened about it was when NetGalley saw the review and what had happened, they took it down and they removed the reviewer.
Nice.
So I was reassured by NetGalley. So.
Yes, that's very, very good. But, that is something that I haven't heard about. And there's always new wrinkles, new pitfalls opening up before the writer at every moment. So it's always worth passing the word on it, just on the off chance that, people, just to keep everybody informed. It's the networking thing. So
I was also really, really glad that it did not happen to a younger writer or a writer who actually identifies as trans, because it was upsetting enough to me without it threatening my individual identity. It threatened my book, and we all feel fairly possessive about our books.
But it's not like they were actually accusing you personally of, a long list of things here.
They were accusing me of being a misogynist. They said that that my writing about a successful trans character was offensive to, I loved this, real women. And I just hit the roof. So, yeah, it was upsetting.
I know a number of trans people, and the women who become men are so much happier that they're no longer the abrasive personality that was associated with them, just because they know who they are now.
Yeah,
and they don't need to be abrasive.
Well, Phylis, in my case, the person who transitioned was the president of the United States in their second term.
Oh, very good.
And it's in that beautiful book that Deborah Godfrey did, Madam President.
Oh, very nice.
And it's written from the point of view of the cisgender press secretary who is going to position this for the public. And it's just a beautiful story of friendship and the experience that we go through when our friends decide to be who they really are. At any rate, the book has some fun stuff. A lot of it's sort of grimdark, but one of my favorite stories in there, and one of the few I didn't do with B Cubed Press, is about a teenage girl whose immigrant family takes advantage of science fictional, near future gene technology to have in utero, her genes are changed so that she'll look like the dominant culture and she won't look like an immigrant. And as a teenager, she is unhappy about this and she wants to look like her true heritage. And the book is about what happens when she demands that her parents pay for plastic surgery so that she can look like who she really is. It's really about, my stories are political, but they're really about how individuals experience the results of political actions.
Yeah. I've had one story where I had a serious reaction from a gay person. And in the story, two young men are trapped somewhere, and one of them approaches the other and requesting a gay relationship, and the guy just says no, and he falls back on, since it's a medieval style scenario, he falls back on the argument necessary during those years of not being able to enter into a childless union. Where
Right.
in a medieval culture where you have high infant mortality, this was very important. And this
That's
young man,
fascinating.
this young man who was gay and had that argument thrown at him several times, was offended. And we entered it into a meaningful conversation talking about the context of the story and people jumping to conclusions.
Mhm.
And that one worked out,
Mhm.
but not all of them do.
I'm thinking that it
So
would be great if Karen wrote a small, just a summary of the events. And, it's the sort of thing that, like, if you pitched it to the CIFOR bulletin, uh, or, it's just,
yeah,
it's it's an interesting and useful experience that people should be told about. God only knows there are places you could post it if you felt like
it
it,
was also it's interesting also from the point of view of I saw the review went up like 2 hours after we posted the book. So
Mhm.
excuse me, people, enough. Um, it went up 2 hours after I posted the book. So this person was obviously looking for
Uh-huh.
keywords.
Mhm.
And of course, I saw it right as I was going to bed. And it's the larger question of what do you do when you get a review, which you believe is unfair.
Mhm.
And um, I thought and thought and thought and thought until I calmed down. And then I contacted the authorities. And I
Mhm.
didn't want to go public about it until I'd completely calmed down. And I'm sort of working towards the point of being calmed down. I think that after I do my readings,
Mhm.
I will be a little bit more even keeled and able to talk about it then, because it's useful from the point of bad things will happen. They are
Mhm.
likely to happen if
Mhm.
you write a book that is political and controversial. And then
It is not possible to not offend somebody. There
exactly.
is nothing you can name that someone will not say, I find those Regency gowns really offensive. And,
So looking at it from that point of view, what do you do at that point? How do you
right,
manage it? And
right.
part of how I manage it is still unfurling. I've
Mhm.
talked to actually, I think this is the first time I've talked about it publicly, but
Mhm.
yeah, it, I'm this is my first full size book,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
this a lot of it's new for me, and I'm thinking, wow, what do I do? But also, I'm quite a bit older than most people are when they put out their first book.
Mhm.
And I have the advantage of having been in crisis management as a PR person. The only trick here is how do you become your own client?
One of the things that you're distinguishing between, instinctively you have done this, is the review that is just a review and the review that is actually an attack upon not your writing, but upon your political, your thinking about trans people. In
Mhm.
other words, it has nothing to do with the work that you have written. It's not really a criticism of the work. It's a criticism about you and your stand on trans people, whatever. It's they're not so in other words, that's the reason it's an unfair critique. And it is and you're right, the fact that it was so fast means that they're sitting there on the lookout like a vulture on a branch waiting for someone to walk by underneath.
Yeah.
And that, so for many reasons, that's highly suspect.
It was so funny because there are 15 stories in the book, and
Hmm.
this is the only one that they mentioned. And yeah,
Yeah, and so
so
that's very, very, and if there are always people who are just essentially troublemakers, and this sounds like one of them. And it's you have to, I guess, if you're a writer, you have to distinguish between people who are essentially trying to cause trouble and people who are actual readers. And I don't that what all the things you say show that this is not a person who's interested in short fiction, in the genre, in reading for entertainment. They are looking for trouble.
it also
Mhm.
brings up the whole issue of negative reviews. I was a book reviewer for many years, mystery, not science fiction, for
Hmm.
January magazine. And do you
Hmm.
know that in that time, I only wrote one negative review?
Yeah.
And it was a very negative review. And my editor said to me, the person who wrote this book is very famous. Are you sure you want to do this? And I said, yeah.
But there's that punch up thing too. I think it's fair to punch up. If you won the Nobel Prize for Literature and the book is really, really dull, I think they can take the hit.
Yeah.
If an unknown writer, this is your first book, I think that you don't punch down.
Yes, that also really intrigued me. But anyway, if it had to happen to someone, it might as well have happened to me, and I'm sure I'm going to recover from it. And I'm
good.
Other than that, I'm really, really having fun with the book. Let me see if I've got it. Yes, there she is. And the most amusing question I've gotten about the book is the person on the cover me? And the answer is no.
Oh, too bad.
Yeah. But I want to say something nice about the cover. Because I've worked on covers for Bob Brown and for a lot of people, and I've been a magazine editor, I was really wanting a great cover. And I selected the photography from a stock house. But I hired a great cover designer, Clarissa Ryan, and she's done a number of science fiction and fantasy covers. And working with her collaboratively on the process, this works, this doesn't, how are we going to do the back, was really fun. And because I'm new, and I wanted to steal ideas from a really great, if you see this back cover, this cover is very similar to the back cover of Welcome to Dystopia, edited by Gordon Van Gelder, who's one of my favorite editors. And my tribute to Gordon was, I thought he had such a killer back cover that I did mine very much the way he did his. And I think that particularly for an unknown writer, having a lot of information on the back cover about what's going on inside really, really helps people in a store or at a convention. And I'm really excited because another challenge I had was, how did I get my books displayed at conventions? And there's a whole thing now where, does Bookview Cafe do its own table at conventions? Or
mostly we don't, because it takes, someone has to invest in going there and manning the table. And a lot of our books are ebooks. And like a lot of mine don't have a paper edition, mainly because I'm too lazy to get them up. And it's a whole separate step, as you know. And
getting the books, keeping track of the sales,
inventory.
Right. You need a salesperson and a bookkeeper,
right,
and someone to haul stuff.
Right. And someone has to manage the money. That's the tricky thing. Is there going to be cash? Are we going to take credit cards? Do you do Square, or are we doing Venmo? So that whole thing becomes very elaborate.
As you know, I have an into the bookselling business because my partner's a bookseller, but he doesn't do tables at conventions anymore. And a lot of our friends don't. But I was very fortunate. What I've been doing is when I go to a convention, I contact the convention, or I talk to someone I know who's going to have a table there. And Impulsive Walrus is going to carry my book for MissCon. And they're such professionals. They're totally cool. And the trade-off is I'm going to do a little table minding and errand running for them. And it's nice because they are well known. And I used to, many years ago, there was a fabulous bookseller who did a lot of conventions, Amy Cat.
Yes.
And she carried the first collections I was ever in. Amy always carried them. I miss her terribly. But I'm working on a convention by convention basis. And WorldCon is going to have a group that I believe also did Norwestcon, and they take books directly from the author, and they're really nice to work with.
I have I don't know if you know Larry Smith, the big book table at the World Cons, and Larry himself has passed away, but he's I know his widow, who is now running the business, and she mysteriously is a fan, and so she gets all the books that I have in paper and puts them there. But if only I could get more of them into paper form, that would be a good resolution for the new year.
Go to draft to digital.
I have them up there, and
let them do the print versions.
Yeah, but you still have to do things like get the full wraparound of the cover. I need,
No,
as
no,
Karen
no, you
rightly
don't.
points
No,
out,
you
the
don't.
back cover.
This is a D2D book.
Yep.
This is okay. This is my primary cover done by Maya Catherine Bonhoff,
What
and
is
This is
it
lovely.
Did you do
and
that yourself?
the back cover is my blurb and then my bio.
And so you just put that up and loaded it onto D2D. You didn't have like the book cover. What about the spine?
The spine.
Yeah, did you do that or did Maya do
Nope,
that? Or?
they do it.
Oh, really?
Now this book and Frozen in Amber and Spoonful of Magic, which are reprints that I just re-released. My formatter uses vellum, and she just clicked a second button and got a PDF for the book. But I have done others where they've just taken my ebook and turned it into a print copy. They're not as pretty inside, but they're done.
I want to say I'm super impressed with vellum. When you use vellum, it generates a wide range of files, a special one for Kindle, one for Kobo, one for Apple Books, one for print. And
Yeah.
then you upload those to the platforms. But the cool thing that I did was I decided, because Bob and I had gotten a lot of negative feedback on Southern Truths and also Alternative Liberties about the fact that we went initially to Amazon because people were having a big "we want to incinerate Bezos" phase. Even though Amazon is so powerful and so many people are buying there, no matter what they may be saying, they're still buying there. I wanted to experiment. So I went directly to Ingram Spark.
That
And
is
I was
supposed to be challenging.
Well, it was a tiny bit challenging, but I just thought to myself, and I'm exhausted, I'm going to put it on Ingram Spark. Once it's up there, I'll go deal with Amazon. And I did. But the amazing thing was Ingram Spark automatically put me everywhere else. Bookshop, Barnes and Noble. I did nothing. Ingram Spark did it. And the convenience was kind of awesome. It
Draft to
probably doesn't
Digital does that too.
it
Yes.
probably doesn't pay as well, but
Well,
with
yeah.
this book was an experiment for me. I am going to do a nonfiction. Well, I'm doing a humor book in August. So this was my experiment to learn how to handle all the systems. And yes, it's a learning curve.
Yeah.
I don't have vellum, but I am on Draft to Digital, and I've got all these. I must have more than a dozen books up only in ebook format, and the idea of getting them all. And every time I read a new one, it's like, oh God, must I do them all? And so I get further and further behind because I'm too prolific at the front end. And I need to get all of these from ebook into paper. And if I could do this, they would be on the Larry Smith table, and it would be, in theory anyway, fine. But it is a heavy lift.
Yeah. Now, I had done a number of ebook and print editions through Draft to Digital,
and you were happy.
and I did them before I had Joyce and Vellum, and I just had them handle the conversion from Word doc to PDF to print. And they did a fine job, no problem. They're prettier if I have Joyce do a PDF, because she does really, she can do the interesting scene separators and setting the margins correctly rather than, because they do tend to get a little bit wobbly in going from Word to EPUB to PDF.
Well, right now I have the documents in the EPUB format. So to get it from EPUB back over into paper.
So
Draft Digital will do it. Like I said, it won't be as pretty.
We have to give it a try just to see if I can make this.
Phylis, I have to ask you, I'm really, really curious. Do people buy? I mean, I'm curious. I don't know yet if people will buy more of my book in ebook or in print. I'm very,
Mhm.
very curious.
I have heard people say, because of and there's a long list of issues here, my arthritis, my vision, etc., I can only do ebooks. And there's an
Mhm.
equal number of people who will say, I will only do paper books because of my issues with, and then there's a long list of issues here.
Yeah.
I think that in an ideal universe, you would have it in both formats because then you cover all the bases.
Right.
But there's a cost and labor of getting it into each format, and usually just getting it up on in ebook, I collapse at the end and just sort of lie there twitching. So I usually don't climb that paper hill, and I should.
Yeah.
So,
I would say probably 90% of my audience is ebook.
Mhm.
okay.
Um, but I like having a paperback to
I
take.
really think that's very nice. And there's that whole thing with like having your movies on disc or having your music on the CD, because frankly, you never know if Bezos will fuck with us.
Yeah.
And if you could just imagine the thing where your ebooks just evaporate into the ether and they're gone. And at that point, paper books, I no longer trust the system, and you can understand why.
Brenda, I was having this discussion
Uh-huh.
um, at NorwestCon
Uh-huh.
with a woman who's a romantasy writer. And she looked at me and said, print books. She says, I do only ebook and I make $50,000 a year on ebooks. She writes 6 ebooks a year and markets them with a group like Bookview Cafe, but it's her
Right.
group. And
Mhm.
I was just like in shock. But I also thought 6 books a year is a lot.
It's exhausting.
And the other thing is that uh, she must be a whiz marketer in some other way. You're not just
Yeah.
throwing them
Well,
out there and walking away.
I
She is
I
doing.
have yes, I have friends who do romance and they do an incredible marketing job. They have games and tricks and giveaways and
Oh yeah.
bundles. And so let me tell you something I've been doing that's really working for me. And I was surprised because I haven't seen other people do it. I have a blog which I've been doing for 20 years, and it used to be on professional marketing communications, and then it became sort of humorous. And I haven't been doing a lot of it. And I did, whenever Bob does a book, I do a promo on my blog about Be Cubed.
Mhm.
But I
Mhm.
started releasing every couple of days an excerpt from one of the short stories in Patty 209. And it's gotten a lot of people to click through and go look at the book. And it's really fun. It really gives a taste of the writing. It lets me talk a little bit about politics. I've been trying to match the excerpt to whatever the disaster of the day in Washington, D.C. is.
So many options.
But
Uh,
but
I
that
have. I think that excerpts are real. It's like the free sample at Costco. Here's a chocolate covered raisin in a little paper cup, and that gets you going.
Mhm. Yeah, I've noticed on Facebook, Brenda does a snippet of the day and 2 sentences. Sometimes it's 5, but she always picks an amazingly interesting snippet. And those are hard to find.
It is hard
Um,
to find, but it is. I try to pick ones that are fun,
yeah,
and that actually is. I think one of the tricks is, if you're going to do that, is to pick a snippet that has. It can't be like the beginning. This is the bad example. It can't be like the beginning of Hawaii by James Michener. The island of Hawaii rises from the Pacific, and
yeah,
a lot of landscape description here. My eyes glaze over. It's like
yeah,
I immediately want a cup of coffee.
yeah, but that's Michener, and everybody who reads Michener
Knows
expects that
that.
kind of an
Yeah.
opening.
Yes.
Um, but I do almost no marketing at all. I'm just too exhausted all the time. And I'm 75 years old. I don't have to do marketing if I don't want to. Um, but in the last couple of weeks, I've noticed my royalty statements from Amazon are
Mhm.
up
Mhm.
by quite a bit. I'm still not making a living off of it, but it's, compared to $16 a month, we're up to 60. 'Cause
Anything is better than nothing.
Right. And my accountant says, you can't retire. You're making too much money.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah. And like the short story I just sent Brenda for proofread. Um, it's one of those markets. The anthology just tickled my brain. And the character, the narrator of the story just says, I have a story to tell. And, that doesn't happen often. But
Whenever it happens, you should let it happen.
I let it happen.
Right.
And I sent it out to people I Zoom with periodically on.
Mhm.
We're not exactly a critique group, but we do each other favors periodically.
Uh,
And
and like Amazon sales are mysterious, and sometimes they are like completely irrational. Do you
yeah,
know Mindy Klasky? She writes
yeah, I
romance.
know Mindy.
Yes.
Yeah, she was on Bookview Cafe for a while.
Right. Did she tell you about her sudden bump in Amazon sales? She had written a novel, one of her romance novels, and it was
Yeah.
not one of the ones that was about baseball. And there's another bunch that she does. She has 2 or 3 series.
Yeah.
It was
to
not
look
one of
this
those,
up.
and it was sort of an orphan. And for many years, it had just sort of lay there, in the back of her Amazon page, and then suddenly, some enormous number of them sold, like 50 in one day. And it was like, what did I do? Is there somewhere a nude picture of me,
club.
something?
Book
And
club.
so she dug deeply into this. And it turns out that over on The Guardian, in the British newspaper, there was a mention of somebody who had written a book with a title that was very, very similar to hers. I mean, talking like about one word different, or a
Yeah.
plural animal instead of animals, or something like that. And it was so a whole bunch of people who read The Guardian were going over to Amazon to look for this book. And they're skimming through all the books titled, A Flood of Animals, or whatever it was. And they clicked the wrong one, and they got a romance fantasy novel instead of. This woman was something totally different. She was
I
writing
love
about
it.
like British politics or ecology in Malaysia or some darn thing. And so they received this totally oddball book. And she's sitting there, as the money pours in, saying, what? But it had nothing to do with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
She may recruit some people to like her book. I mean,
Exactly.
it has
Exactly.
happened. It has
I
happened to me that I
loved her fright court stories, where at midnight, the night court system in DC, New York, wherever she had placed it, the regular court closes down. A new judge, new court clerk, new bailiff, and they handle all of the paranormal cases.
That's wonderful.
And
she's an excellent writer, but she has a lot of different irons in the fire. And like a lot of us, she does not look at her Amazon sales there are people who check every day, and I'm sure that really destroys your soul. So it is, but so she wisely only looks at it about once a week, and it's startling, as you note, when there's a sudden bump up or down. And it's sort of, if you're able to, it's sort of worth digging into why these things happen. But because sometimes it's quite fun. She was astonished, but there's no way to go back and explain to people you hit the wrong key. And you're right, exactly what you said. Maybe this is just the one book, then they will say, wow, this is quite fun. Or maybe they say, I wouldn't enjoy it, but you, my daughter, you would enjoy it. And then away we go.
In terms of obsessing over Amazon rankings and sales, I have to say, I've benefited enormously by working for Bob as an editor and a publicist, because I've been able to go through the ups and downs and the panics and everything with every book that B Cubed Press has done. And I would certainly argue that I think that some of the best stories ever written for B Cubed Press have appeared in the books that didn't do as well. And that really breaks my heart. Specifically, there is a story by Adam Troy Castro that appeared in the Post Row book, and I consider it to be one of the best things Adam has ever written. And that book did not sell as well as some of the other B Cubed Press books. So, but I certainly look forward to Adam doing some collections of his short fiction, because he consistently hits it out of the park.
Yeah.
I have Bookview is trying to gear up the schedule for the next year, and Jen is leaning on me to get together all of my short fiction into a collection. And I
Yes.
actually had a look at them, and holy God, I have something like I have too many for one thing. What I'm having to do, what I'm going to do is split all the historical stuff into
Mhm.
one volume, which Dave Smeds has already done a cover for. And then I'll have to have a separate one for science fiction and fantasy.
That's what I ended up doing.
Uh-huh.
I did I kept the wandering theme in the titles.
Right.
Um, but I had Fantastical Journeys, which was fantasy, Speculative Voyages, which is more science fiction,
Mhm.
but I had some contemporary fantasy kind of creep into it because I just had too many. And I did steampunk and anyway, I've got 4 or 5 collections out there, but
How
I
do they
grouped them.
do?
Pardon?
How do they
What?
do?
Not very well.
I
Um,
think that mostly collections don't. I
they
mean,
don't.
just as a general thing.
Right. And anthologies, as a rule, don't.
Right.
Even some of the technobook anthologies I did with Daw,
Mhm.
I personally get bored with
Mhm.
short stories,
Mhm.
which means editing for Bob is a chore at times.
I
Except that
love them.
we are now getting the creme de la creme of
Mhm.
short fiction writers and
Mhm.
writing,
Mhm.
and that makes them good. But putting together an anthology means you kind of have to scrape the bottom of the barrel sometimes.
Yeah, I
Because you
am just
need a certain
loving
amount of wordage in there.
I
Yeah.
am just loving anthologies, and the Alternative Liberties one, the quality of the writing for that was just to the
Oh,
point where the editors were fighting violently at the end about what was, what we were going to have to leave out.
we've
That was
only got
rough.
room
And
for one more book, and there's 6
and
that
the
are
book is still like the size of a Bible, but
yeah.
I mean, I was mentioning I have a lot of friends who are breaking into writing, and one of the
Mhm,
frustrations is that it used to be you could write a fantasy or science fiction story and send it off to one of the major magazines. And
mhm,
the magazines are fewer and they've become harder to crack, but there
Yes.
are more and more anthologies, some of
Yes.
which pay
mhm.
professional rates, but
Yes.
their themes are this narrow,
Oh,
like
absolutely.
mermaids who have angry parents, and
Yeah. Or they'll say only authors from Western Canada. Well, at that point, it lets out 99% of the
or
human race.
Sasquatches attending university. Um,
Mhm,
and
Yeah.
recently there was an anthology call from Impulsive Walrus, and
mhm.
it was one of the most intriguing calls. I'm going to have a story in the book, and it's called Glenn Must Die. And it's based on the premise that we all have in our social group, whether they're in college, whether they're older people with the bridge club, whether you're in a motorcycle group, there is one horse's ass in the group that
Mhm.
everyone just goes, "Oh, Glenn." And you get so angry. This is the person who, screws things up or does terrible things to you because they're thoughtless. And yet they're still with the group because of some reason. And they challenged everyone to write a story about this horrible person that ends up with them actually dying.
Oh,
And so, but you're being funny, but you're also, and I got to read, I have several friends of mine wrote for this. These were some of the funniest stories I have ever read. And I
Mhm.
just thought that they hit on the most universal truth that we all have a friend who makes you want to rip your hair out.
mhm.
Yeah,
Well, the real question is, it's fun to write those. It's fun to invent an anthology like that. Is it possible to read 20 of those stories in a row?
We're going to find out.
Okay, good.
So I read a lot of anthologies, and I'm currently reading Gardner Dozois' anthology Future Crimes.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
And it was published about 18 or 20 years ago. And so it's amazing how many of those stories accurately predicted information technology and abuse of it that's going on right now. And the stories are beautifully written. Gardner was a spectacular editor.
Oh,
He
he was.
really, really was. And that is the other thing that you really there's as you rightly say, there's a lot of anthologies out there. There's a glut of them, and they're certainly, and all of the anthologies are flooded with submissions. Am I correct? And what
Yes.
that really means is that there's a lot of people writing in these things, and I don't know, it is short fiction is hard to market, even with this many anthologies.
Yeah, it's true.
Right. Yeah. And back to Impulsive Walrus, Frog and Esther Jones. They have this bizarre sense of humor as people. And their first book was It's Not My Cow. Came up out of a conversation over dinner at a con. I don't have a cow in that fight or whatever, and it turned into an anthology that was just so much fun.
Yes.
And another good one that I have fortunate enough to get into was Debris and Detrius, the Lesser Greek Gods.
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
wow.
I've forgotten who did it, but it was so much fun to take those staid old legends that doctoral candidates write, and twist them sideways.
It's fun to write them, but I just wonder whether it's possible to make a career or a living on doing this, because there's so many and they tend not to make money.
Yeah.
And
I don't.
it's
I don't know anyone who can actually make a living with short fiction.
the only person I can think of who you could think of was doing that was Harlan Ellison, and I don't think his major money came from the short fiction.
However,
I think it
there
screenwriting.
are some people who have been able to do well with it because the short stories have been made into films
Right.
or television.
Ted Chiang.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
as somebody who just writes at that length, I love short stories. I grew up reading James Thurber and
Uh-huh.
John Updike and just all these short stories. I
I
was kind of
think
raised on New Yorker.
it is my theory that most writers have a natural length that they gravitate to, and you
Mhm.
clearly are in that under 10,000 words sort of groove. I'm naturally at the 100,000 word mark. Everything I write automatically hits 100,000 words, except if it runs long or short. But about once a year, I write a short story, and then I have to stress about what to do with it, and they run around and they do this or they do that. But if you do one a year, suddenly I have 40 short stories. Like, I don't know exactly what I
Yes.
did. So
Yeah.
now I have to shove out a collection, and
Yeah.
there's sort of nothing I can do about it.
I was very, very fortunate that I began my publishing career with Daw Books, and they used to do anthologies all the time, produced through Techno Books with Martin Greenberg.
Oh,
And
yes.
as a Daw author, I got invites to all of them. I did not participate in all of them, but I got the invites, and my first one was Olympus. And I sold my very first short story, and it paid for my airline ticket to Britain so I could do research for my Merlin's Descendants series. And the Merlin books were all 200,000 words plus.
This is the Daw anthology I was in, and this was the annual World's Best SF, and Donald Wollheim was the editor, and so somehow he fished up one of my short stories and got into this. I cannot believe that was one of the best short stories of 1989, and I have written better short stories in my day. But if you sometimes you're just in the right place with the right wordage.
Right. I think probably my favorite short story, the one that means most to me, and I think was written in haste, and I didn't have time to do a lot of rewriting, so it didn't get stale. And that was my Godiva piece in Protest Diaries.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I had not planned to write for that particular anthology, but because Bob is my best friend, I did the proofread of the completed anthology, And I said, wait a minute, there's one missing. The one of the most important stories is missing.
Absolutely.
And you
And so,
persuaded Bob that it had to be redone.
right. So I sat down and, I did like half an hour's research on who Godiva and her husband were, and when they lived, etc. And I wrote the story in like an hour.
Uh-huh.
And the next day I rewrote it and I sent it to Sarah Mulla and Joyce Reynolds Ward. They got back to me the same day, which is totally unusual. So by like the fourth day, I sent it to Bob, and it's in the book.
No,
I will. My favorite short story, and this is notable mainly because it was weird, but um, word was passed to me through my church that Christianity Today magazine was, for reasons known only to God, had decided to publish short fiction. And it was like one of those stupid editorial decisions that you can immediately say, darlings, lay down for a minute and you'll feel better. But they were doing something, and the guy contacted me and said, you attend Truro Episcopal and you write science fiction. And I said, yeah. And he said, write something. And then he said the really magic words. This is key. He said, we're paying $1 a word.
oh my
Right?
gosh.
Right? $1 a word.
Brenda, people
Analog,
would
my
change
darlings,
religions
pays
to
8
get at
cents
that.
a word.
Yeah.
8 cents a word is princely, okay? And by the way, this rate has not changed in our lifetimes. Analog was paying 8 cents a word back before my kids could vote. So, all right, $1 a word, you could really learn to write. And so I wrote a short story, and they even made me rewrite it in second person, which I feel was a severe editorial mistake. You have no idea what a bad idea that was. But
Yeah.
for $1 a word, you could really get used to that. And I said, and I knew this was going nowhere because it was a dumb editorial direction in the first place. And so they did it. They printed it. I believe you can still find it on the Christianity Today website. And then, of course, I'm hanging on to the rights, and I think it'll go into the science fiction collection if I ever get that together, because it's not really historical. It's about they wanted an anti-abortion story, and this is not really an anti-abortion story, but it is a story about it's a story about genetic engineering, because if you can clone people, then what you would really do is you would clone. Well, you can actually do this in horse breeding. Secretariats, descendants are now all dominating the races. But supposing you could clone Jesse Owens and then suddenly start sweeping the Olympics in track and field, or you could clone, I don't know enough about athletics, but somebody, and that would be interesting, and probably not legal after a while, because it would be really boring to see endless Xeroxes of Jesse Owens running. But it was I had no problem selling it, and at $1 a word, you could really get down in there.
Yeah. You bring up an interesting thing that I'm realizing listening to this is selling collections is easiest if you are already established with a publisher writing long full-length books, or writing short fiction.
You have to have it. It's nice to have an in. And the other thing that it's nice to have, of course, is a reputation. And one of the things you do when you're starting a collection, like you see them on Kickstarter, you get a couple of big names in there. John Scalzi, Stephen King,
the anthologies, yes.
They're the nameplate, they're the front thing. And you start in with the Kickstarter saying, we're going to do an anthology about, something here, about pie baking by aliens, bakery by aliens, and David Gerald is headlining it. Then you can get Kickstarter support, and of course you'll get plenty of people contributing short stuff, and the whole thing will roll around. But if you are just starting out if from zero and you don't have a big nameplate person to front it, then it's a little more rough.
Yeah, my feeling about Kickstarter is I've backed a lot of them, good and bad. Kickstarters should only be run by people who enjoy running Kickstarters, because you
Yes.
can just feel
It's a lot
the
of work.
person's energy level. Some people love doing this stuff. They do a spectacular job of it. And other people, you can tell that they're ripping their hair out in handfuls. And that's not fun to be part of the process.
No. Now, Judy Tarr did one Kickstarter, probably about 10 years ago, where the prizes were all horse oriented, even though the book she was kickstarting wasn't. And I think the big thing, $1,000 contribution or whatever, was a weekend at her horse camp where you
The
where
ponies.
right, you groom the horses, you clean up after the horses, you do yoga with the horses, and she does do these horse camps periodically, and they're
How
5
did the
days.
Kickstarter work out? Do you know?
She fully funded,
Okay, that's the
but then
I'm impressed.
But then I didn't hear anything more about it.
She
So,
is a known quantity. I think it's much
yeah,
harder to start a Kickstarter if you're a virgin, if no one knows you, if you've never done this before, and you're trying to get it off the ground without anything.
yeah,
This is harder. And so
yeah,
it's Kickstarter and also Patreon is a lot easier to do if you already, so that's always the problem. How do you get your foot in the door to get it going so that then you can become a dynamite Kickstarter person?
yeah, yeah. Now with Frog and Esther Jones, their Cthulhu Con anthology, which was another really fun one to write. That was, I don't know, it was delayed several times, and it seemed to me like they did a Kickstarter to start the project to entice the writers. And then they did another Kickstarter to actually get it published. And I don't know anything about the sales of that particular anthology, but by the time it was published 2 years late, I had forgotten the story I'd
Yes.
written.
Well, there are. I've actually have someone is it's been like 2 or 3 years. I've sold something to an anthology, and they vanished off the radar for years, and then suddenly it appeared, and it was like, whoa! I remember writing that story, and I sold it to you and everything. But there's many slips between cup and lip, and I think it's particularly dangerous with Kickstarter because you're promising a product.
Right. Yeah. We're down to under 10 minutes.
Yes. Yes. I wanted to say that there was a friend of mine from journalism school went and worked for a lot of mainstream New York publishers in the magazine business. And a few years ago, she and I think and another editor did a book called 20 Under 40. So this was about 10 so years ago. They decided, no, 20 over 40. They decided to do one called 20 over 60. And I sent them a story, being an older writer and writing about an older character. And it was a reprint from B Cubed Press, from Alternative Truths. And I didn't hear anything. And 2 years later, I get this very apologetic, we thought we had an editor for this. We've been shopping it around. We apparently cannot find an editor. We're really sorry. Well, that story, Patty 209, became the title for my collection.
Beautiful story.
Hold on. And as I was headed off to New York a couple of weeks ago, I got a note from the editor going, guess what? We found a publisher. We're going to publish it. And I said to her, so wait a minute. I need to warn you that story is now going to be published in an anthology. And she's in a collection. And she's like, oh, fine. So Patty 209 is going to get published twice.
Right.
Great. Very good. Well, it is so complex. I really, to market, to try to find a publisher for this kind of thing. It's hard enough about getting a novel. How do you actually persuade a New York publisher to take on a collection?
Oh, you don't.
There's no market for this. It is really sad. So, I can't figure out a way to monetize this, but someone on Facebook posted a long screed the other day about how impossible to make money as a writer. And this is sort of the proof. There used to be a time when you could make a living writing short fiction. It was in the 1930s, and you published in Life and Look magazine. But now nobody, not only are there no paper magazines, but they don't do fiction.
Yeah. When I first started, and I was reading the Swiffle Bulletin and the forum religiously because I knew nothing. And this guy writes in, he says, "How can we make a living writing? They're, they're only paying 5 cents a word for short stories. That's the same money that Mark Twain made 100 years ago." And you don't make money as a writer. The way to make a small fortune writing is to start with a very large fortune.
And the other thing that I'm on a group for very young writers on Facebook, and the number of people who pile on and say, "I need to make money. My electric bill is due. I thought I would write fiction." And it's like, oh, darling.
Yeah.
Darling, if you need to pay your electric bill, prostitution is the way to go, because you're not going to make enough money writing to keep the lights on anytime soon.
Right. And there was a screenwriter's strike. And she said, "Oh, I'll just take the strike time to write my novel."
Fine.
No, you don't write a novel in 30 days.
There was
unless you're Chuck Tingle.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, Mad Robbins, former Bookview Cafe member, used to teach writing at the New College in New York City. And she, when she was doing this, it was short fiction or something like that. And she had at the beginning of every class, she would ask the pupils, "What do you want to get out of this class?" And most of them were saying things like, "Well, I want to learn to express myself," or, I'm finally my 3-year-old is pottied and I want to get to do something different now that I can get my head out of childcare. And one young woman said, "Well, I have come to New York to become a star on Broadway, but until then, I thought I would support myself by writing." Oh, every writer I say this to laughs. That's the first reaction.
No, sweetie, it's waitressing, not writing.
Exactly. Well, prostitution really does pay, I tell you, honey. But it is just really sad because, and that plan to become a star on Broadway.
Yeah.
So anyway, you got your dreams, baby. You do it. But I just don't think you need another way to keep alive.
Okay, we're down to 3 minutes, Bobby.
And Bob's here.
Bob's back, so it's time to close
and I
it
should
out.
restate that we screwed up and did not properly communicate information to Michael Swanwick, and that's why you're listening to us instead of Michael. But we do promise you we will have Michael on at a future date.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, though? If Michael's going to compete with the show you guys just put on, he's got a high bar ahead of him. You guys, I appreciate very much. I mean, today was one of the most honest discussions of writing I've seen in a while, and is worthy of a WorldCon panel. And speaking of WorldCon, how many of us will be there?
I'm going to be there. Yay!
Great, all of us.
Yeah, and Brenda, I'm also taking Amtrak up.
Oh, are you? Well, we're going to take Amtrak as well. So if you want to try and coordinate, we can, and we can help tote each other's luggage.
But
I will email you.
We have to do a B Cubed gathering for us and for our readers.
We could do that. Yeah. And in fact, if I forget which is the party hotel, and I don't remember where my reservation is. If someone is in the party hotel, we could have a room party.
Bob, we could do B Cubed Sunday morning and bring in a live audience.
Ooh, would that be fun?
Let me send a note to Sunny Jim and see what we've got available. Sunday morning, 9 o'clock at WorldCon should be fairly. There should be a fair amount of space available.
Yeah, we could also do it out of my room and just have everyone come into the room and do it there. Grab some chairs.
It would be nice to have it, and we could do it on Sunday, just this exact time, Sunday morning. I think it would be a riot.
And then we'll get people in a room, and we'll also be able to broadcast out to the usual audience.
That would be great.
Okay, and Liam Westcott put up a request for Harry Turtledove. I will tell you that Harry's wife, Laura, is booked
Yes.
for July, and we're going to talk primarily about the musical 1776
Oh, that'd
because
be great.
Down,
because of
Joe.
the 4th of July.
Yes, it should be
You know,
very, very nice. And
yeah.
there is nothing that is about musical theater that Laura does not know. And I am going to have her read the uh uh be a beta reader for the draft of the novel I'm writing, in which I slay live theater dead and then raise the corpse from the coffin.
Okay, Thea Williams and Leah Rush will be at Worldcon.
Good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Close us out, Bob. This could go on for 3 days.
Okay.
Yeah. Get us out of here,
I'm
Bob.
trying, but the old saying about the Chinese image for trouble is two women under one roof. I mean, they didn't say that the same symbol for silence is three women and one man. I know. I will pay for that someday.
Yeah.
Cheryl Alexander, PM me about that friend you recommended to Bookview Cafe. Is all I can say. Okay, that's it. I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Thanks, Bob.
I need more coffee.
Hey, I'm still having coming off of this whatever the hell it was I had. I am still doing my mint tea and loving every minute of it. But I want to say thank you guys all. It was a great show. BQ Press is continuing. As soon as I get done here, I shift over to my edit mode because I'm working on edits on projects that are forthcoming. And congratulations to Karen for Patty 209.
Thank you.
And congratulations to Phyl for the Barefoot Sheriff. And I'm not sure, Brenda, what your new one is.
Salacian Majesty.
Well, his Salacian Majesty came out in April, and that's the Sharks, Drugs, and Rock and Roll novel. And I'm still racing around with this like mad because it's the only book I will have out this year. But I do write a novel a year. So next year next year in Jerusalem, guys.
Yeah. Cheryl, you can use Facebook Messenger to get a hold of me.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're
And
easily
that said, I'm